Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bible 1 Year to Preacher's Husband. Today we're going through 2 Chronicles 28 and also 2 Kings chapter 16 and 17. Tomorrow we're going to go through Isaiah chapter 13 through 17. So today we are talking about a couple of kings. Now both of these kings were not exactly what you would call role model kings for anybody to follow, just so you know in advance before we get too far into this. We're talking about Judah's king Ahaz and Israel's king Hoshea. So let's just go ahead and talk about Ahaz first, okay? We'll just dive into him. Now this is a depiction of him and of course the pilfering that happened during his reign. Now Ahaz, he was the 11th king of Judah, the son of Jotham. He confirmed idol worshiper. So he was confirmed, it was well known that he was an idol worshiper. He submitted voluntarily to Assyria. In other words, he just gave up. When they attacked, he's like, here, take my stuff. When Ahaz ascended the throne, the people and their king had become confirmed idol worshippers. Ahaz took the worship of the Baals to the point of burning his own children as an offering to Baal. Wow. I just can't imagine. Now we get to verses 5 through 8 of 2 Chronicles chapter 28. This guy Pekah, he was 18th and the next to the last king of Israel, and he scored a major victory over Judah. But he released all of his prisoners in response to God's command. Now Ahaz of Judah had forsaken the Lord, so he was defeated by the king of Damascus as well, which carried away a number of hostages. After that, Pekah, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, also defeated Ahaz of Judah. Now out of Judah's army, 120,000 were killed. Now that probably meant that Ahaz was left with about little less than half of his original army that he started out with. Additionally, Ahaz lost his son, his chief of staff, his prime minister. Pekah's army also took a huge number of people as hostages and transported them to the capital city of Samaria in Israel. Now, once again, a prophet appeared. That's that Oded guy. This time, he lived in Samaria. He confronted the returning victorious army with some basic facts about God's divine law. Now, their slaughter of the fellow Hebrews was not acceptable, not to him and not to God. Israelites were never to enslave other Israelites. That's just kind of a rule they went by. But this is what Pekah was planning to do in Israel. So some of the leaders of the northern kingdom realized the seriousness of this mistake that they were about to make. And the army of Israel abandoned the hostages, and some other people were put in charge of making sure that they returned to Judah. Now these captives were given food and clothes, and some even received donkeys on which they could ride back as far as Jericho on these. And that's where they were left. Now, Ahaz of Judah found himself under increasing pressure. The nation had already been defeated by Aram and the other northern kingdom. Now the Edomites and the Philistines returned to do some damage to him as well. But rather than turning to the Lord for help, Ahaz tried to solve his problems by asking the king of Assyria to protect him. So he offered the Assyrian king all of his possessions and everything that belonged to the temple. The Assyrian king did go and defeat Damascus, which he had planned to do anyway. It wasn't. So then he marched to Jerusalem and just helped himself to everything that there was. He just pilfered the whole place and just took whatever he wanted. Ahaz decided to pursue still another solution. Since the Arameans had defeated him earlier, the king concluded that the gods of Damascus must be strong, so he decided he's going to worship them. Well, that didn't turn out too good. That seemed to make God angry, of course, as well. His solution for dealing with these ineffective false gods was to empty the temple of the true God, shut its doors, and continue to just build more and more idol-worshipping sites. Now, the prophet Isaiah has specifically warned Ahaz against making this unreliable alliance with the Assyrians. And then it just went downhill from there. Eventually he dies, and Hezekiah takes over as king in his place. And that is the end of Ahaz. See, clearly he was not a role model for being a king. And Hoshea, I'm just going to vote him a thumbs down as well. We're in 2 Kings, and chapter 16 goes through more of Ahaz and just a couple other things about him and his idolatry. But Hoshea here, he became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned for 9 years. And he did what was evil inside the Lord as well. Assyria attacked him, and Hoshea became a vassal and paid him tribute. In other words, he's like, here, I'm going to give you this money. Y'all don't attack us anymore. I'll just keep paying you some money every year if you just don't attack us anymore. So he did. And for a few years that worked out well, until he just decided not to pay him like he had done in the previous years. And when that happened, the king of Assyria had him arrested and put in prison. So Assyria turns around and invades the whole land. They go to Samaria, and they besieged it for 3 years. Now, why did Israel fall? Well, this disaster happened because Israel sinned against the Lord. That's why it happened. They worshipped other gods, and that's the one thing that God kept saying, don't do this, don't do this. They served Baal instead of God, and they even sacrificed their sons and daughters in fire to these other gods over and over. And then all these other countries and nations as well, and all these foreign refugees that came in, they can continue to do the same thing, burning their own children in fire to all these different gods that are listed here in the Bible here in 2 Kings 17. They did fear God, but they also worshiped their own gods in addition to God. However, these nations would not listen, but they continued to observe their former practices of this other god worships. And that was the main thing here, was what happens when a nation decides that they're just going to ignore God? Well, they fall. That's pretty much what happens. They fall. If you're wondering if Hoshea even existed, if anything, this is a actual seal of Hoshea, King Hoshea. This was his seal when he was the king. So this is actually an archaeological find that happened, and there he is right there. That is his official king's seal. I hope this has touched you in some way. If it has, click that like button, the subscribe button. Give me a rumble if you're watching on Rumble. And of course, hit your little notification jingle bell so you get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow, for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.